Well, hello, welcome to our first interview that I'm doing for the parish. I don't know how these are going to go. I'm using a call recorder for Skype, so I'm hoping that it works out fine. But yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes along over time. But I've got Linda Scrivener with us. You all know Linda very well. Linda is the spiritual director. Is a spiritual director in the diocese and does a lot of spiritual direction and contemplative prayer in the parish. And one of the things I've done, I think I did 4 sessions on the spiritual practice of Lectio Divina. And I think that there was kind of a mixed response to it, really. I think some people found it quite helpful, but others found it a bit confusing. And that's partly down to the fact that I'm no expert at it. I've done it, I can do it, but having somebody who actually teaches on it regularly is better trained than me. Someone like Linda is a much better person to really lead us on that kind of journey. So, Linda, welcome to welcome to the internet. Welcome to
Thank you.
Skype.
My first time.
So, tell us about Lectio, how you find it helpful for yourself, and tell us what it is and how it's beneficial to other people.
Right. Well, with myself, I think it's a way of going much. First of all, I think you've already touched on this point that praying with the scriptures is different from Bible study. And I often introduce this when I'm doing a day on praying the scriptures, that the Bible study is more of an intellectual exercise, whereas praying with the scriptures is more about listening to God, and it can be more transforming, I think. So there's a difference, a big difference between Bible study and praying with the scriptures. With myself, I find that praying with the scriptures encourages me to really sort of think what God might be saying to me through the passages of the Bible. So yes, and I think there are a few pointers here, Dan. There are 2 ways of praying with the Bible. One is using Lectio Divina. The other one is in Ignatian contemplation, where one looks at the Gospels. And I think the Lectio is better for some of the perhaps Old Testament passages, or the Psalms. It's very good using it for the Psalms. You can also use it for the Lord's Prayer, and also perhaps some hymns if people are really into hymns. It's a very good method. You can use those. It's not just about looking at Bible passages. There are, and some people will use perhaps spiritual poems or something. So it can have quite a wide range of uses. And the idea is you choose a passage that's not too long, and then you read it slowly. And you might have to read it 2 or 3 times. But the idea is as you read it slowly, if a phrase or just a word jumps out of you, then you stop at that point and you sort of meditate on it. Now, I often use the examples perhaps in the days of the Middle Ages monasteries, when perhaps a lot of the brothers couldn't read, and during meal times or something, one of them would read a passage from the Bible, and he would continue to read it, and then when a phrase or words resonated with one of the brothers, they would then go back to their cell and meditate on it. So that's I think what it's certainly a well and trusted type of prayer. And so with this word or phrase, you then just sit with it and just sort of meditate with it and just see where it takes you. And one of the things I do, because I often say that I pray with a pencil in my hand, I find that much easier, is I might do something like a mind map. And this one, I've started, obviously, the phrase that jumped out to me was "be still," and then I just sort of arrowed and just seen where that's taken me. I put silence, stillness, waiting upon God, reaching out to others, God loves flows through us. I just see where that word, what comes from that word. So that's the second phrase part. That's the meditation. And then you let that phrase then lead you into prayer. So it may be then that you find that after the meditation, that will sort of take you into praying, perhaps for others or for the world, or, you know, in whatever way that prayer might take. And then the fourth part is the contemplation. After you've had the prayer session, you sit and you just let that word become part of you. And some people say that then there might be a fifth stage, is that after that you allow that to lead you into action. So that's where perhaps it's very useful for people that see mission as their ministry. So you know that there could be the 5 stages for it. So that's really how it works: the reading, the slow reading, the meditation, the prayer, the contemplation, and maybe then leading you into action. So and I just feel that over time, I mean, there was many years ago, I was like so many people. I did everything in my own strength. You know, I had to sort of preempt what was going to happen. I tried to control things. But I feel that I am a very, very different person these days, and that's really through practicing some of these prayer methods. And I think Lectio Divina is a very good one to start with, actually, because we all have access to the Bible. There are stories and psalms that we are familiar with. And a very good one to start with is the first, perhaps 8 verses of Psalm 139, because that's the one where God created us. And I think that's it. It's a very good one for speaking personally to us. And there's another passage, which I think is Isaiah. I can never remember whether it's 43, verses 1 to 7. Let me just see if I've got that here. No, I can't see it, but it's the one where yes, it's 43, 1 to 5, when the Lord created and formed us. So those are really good 2 passages to start with. If we were doing a week of accompanied prayer, those are the 2 passages that we would give somebody on the first night, just to get them into the flow of things.
So if people started to engage Lectio, what would they go in expecting to happen?
I think the first thing to say, Dan, is that it might be that this isn't the way of praying for you, because one of the things I find with prayer is that they don't always work for everybody, and then people get disillusioned. So, I mean, if people wanted to explore with different types of prayer, they need to look at a variety of things. So the first thing is if it doesn't work, that's absolutely okay. I say that with all prayer methods, because, you know, some people feel that they're a spiritual failure. It's amazing, or people think that somebody else is going to do it much better than they are, you know. So I think that's the first thing. There's no right or wrong way about these different ways of praying. But I think over time, using Lectio, what I would expect to happen is that the scriptures become more personal to you. So, you know, there's Bible study where you're trying to work out what happened, understand it, etc., etc. But the praying is hearing God speaking personally to you. And because I'm now at a stage in my spiritual journey where I am more contemplative, that's often the way that I tend to read the Bible, because, again, I have this thing about Bible study. I think it has to be well done. I think sometimes in some house groups it can be perhaps a bit more trouble than it's worth. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So that's what to me I feel safer praying with the scriptures, because it's about God speaking to me personally. And over that time, that sort of just makes one more aware of the presence of God within the world. It also, I think the other big thing it's transformed me, Dan, is that we are all unique, and I'm happy to be myself, whereas at one time, when one's younger, one perhaps tries to be what's, certainly perhaps in relationships, you try to be perhaps what somebody else they expect you to be. So I think it's a very freeing thing, because I'm the person that God created, and I'm quite happy to be me. And if people don't like that, then that's absolutely fine by me as well. So that's one of the big differences, that I feel that I've got a much deeper personal relationship with God.
And how has Lectio helped you to be more yourself with God and with others?
Just by being to becoming more still, I think, and just being aware of God's presence in the whole of life, and also I think one of my what do you call them, light bulb moments was when the very first retreat that I went on many years ago, back in the 80s, and the retreat conductor, before we started, sort of said to us that, we are all unique. There's nobody else like you. You have your own set of gifts. And I thought, oh, wow. And that was a real light bulb moment. So I think, it just encourages me to be with God, to spend with God, and just, he's in control, basically. I don't have to make that effort. And that's come through, I think, praying with the scriptures and getting to know God's word, and to hearing God speak to me personally.
What benefits could you see in a time of isolation to come from Lectio?
To help build up that personal relationship with God. And I think the thing is, sometimes I think in a difficult situation, Dan, people will ask the question, why has God allowed this? But actually, I think God is suffering with us in it. And I think that the more one gets to know, or feel that one gets to know how God works, and to know God at a deeper level, I feel sure that he's probably suffering in this as well.
I think for me, it's interesting that, because spirituality, I often will say, exists on two planes. You've got the vertical relationship between us and God, what they often call coram deo, if you want the Latin.
Yeah.
And then you've got this kind of horizontal relationship between people, which is the coram mundo, between you and others. And actually, to have in a Christian life, to have a good coram mundo relationship, you need a good coram deo relationship to ground it on.
Yes, exactly. Because I think the thing is, what I am able to do to a certain extent is to accept people as they are. They may see things differently to me, but that's okay. And I think the thing is to actually respect them and to listen to them, and perhaps say, yes, I hear what you're saying, but actually I don't agree with it. I feel this. And this is where the feeling language is good as well, because I feel this. This is how I see it, and that's okay as well. So that way it stops a lot of the need perhaps for one person to be dominant over another, to say, yes, there's room for us all in it as well. So that, to me, that's about the horizontal.
And without, I guess, being in isolation, a lot of people don't have a lot of horizontal at the moment. So the nice thing about Lectio is that you can work on that vertical.
Exactly,
so that when we come back out of isolation, the horizontal will hopefully be something that then we can establish differently, because we've established a new vertical relationship between us and God.
A deeper relationship with God, yes.
And that way we're making this time worthwhile. It's not a good time, nobody wants it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean we have to just be constantly about it.
No.
But
And in fact, Dan, it's the difference between loneliness and being alone with God, isn't it? So that there's something something positive that can come out of the isolation. And I think that's borne out people begin to realise that by the sort of move in mindfulness. I mean, that they haven't necessarily brought God into that, but they're beginning to realise that actually there's some benefit in slowing down and just learning to be, actually. And the next stage to that, I think, for Christians is to develop the relationship with God. And I think you can do that by different ways, exploring different ways of praying.
One of the things I did say in the videos, which is hard for people to understand, hard for anyone to really kind of get their minds around a bit, but I got it from the book that I've read on it by Basil Pennington on Lectio Divina. But actually, I've come across it in the more evangelical world by a guy called have you come across Larry Crabb? Do you know Larry Crabb?
Yes.
Yeah. Larry Crabb's written a wonderful book called Finding God. Actually, I think you've, unlike with the camera on my wife's phone, is this backwards?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, well, it actually says Finding God anyway. So, and the point being is that actually you don't do something like Lectio in order to gain the benefits from the spiritual life. You do Lectio in order to engage with God entirely.
Yes.
And you would do Lectio even if there were no benefits to you at the
exactly.
end of it.
Yes.
Which to me, I think in some ways is quite liberating, because then you're not placing any demands on it.
Yes.
And you're giving yourself entirely to God through it.
Yes.
But you're open to wherever God takes you. You're not going in there with a plan. And and what I tried to say was, even if your desires are good, I need to be more holy, more loving, more forgiving, more peacemaking, whatever it is, actually you're still going in with you at the forefront.
Yes.
Whereas if you enter into Lectio or any spiritual practice without you at the forefront, without your needs and the benefits you gain from it, but entirely just to engage God, that empties you in a way that allows
God to work.
God, and to hear God, because because God's voice is not like us talking across Skype now. So I am completely open to whatever you say, because it's coming from you, and my mind isn't going to filter it in the same way. But with God, it's not the same kind of conversation. So often I could even hear a very holy voice in my mind and my heart.
Yes.
But that doesn't make it God's voice. It's just a voice that's playing a tape.
Yes.
And so often we come to things thinking that we know what God wants in this situation.
Yes.
And so if you come to God entirely without any demands upon him to benefit you with any need, then you're much more open to what he might say to you.
Yes.
Because you've got no filters on.
No. And that also is borne out with the Ignatian spirituality, Dan, in the discernment of spirits. It can be quite complicated, but as a starting point, it's about believing that God really wants the best for us, and as you say, to be open and to listen to him. And then during what's called the review of prayer is to engage with the feelings about some of these things that you think might have heard. And if it feels peaceful, or it seems to give you life, and it seems to be drawing you from God, that's an indication that it might be from God. And if you think, I'm not sure, and it sort of lowers your spirits, the chances are that it probably isn't. Now, that's very, very basic. It is far more complicated than that, but that's a fairly good indication to start thinking, well, perhaps, and then I say to people, start exploring that, and just pushing a door open, and if it does open, then go through it and try the next thing. But it's trying to follow God's will. It's a step at a time, and sometimes you might come against a brick wall, and that's a chance. Well, maybe we need to look in a different direction. And I think sometimes if one's trying to do something and one has to put so much energy into it and so much of oneself into it, one has to ask, is that necessarily of God? Am I thinking I'm working for God rather than trying to work with him. In fact, I had a directee once many years ago who was a priest, and he used to say to me, do you know my biggest fault, Linda? He said, I'm so impatient. He said, I want God's kingdom to come now. So I said to him, and then I tried to explain to him the difference between, I don't think we're called to work for God. I think we're called to work with God to encourage his kingdom here. And I was taking him through the exercises, and after a while he came to start to say to me, I can feel myself changing, Linda. I can feel myself changing. And you know, he was still really enthusiastic because that was his gift. But actually he became a little bit more discerning and waiting for when things naturally seemed to be happening, and then sort of building on those, if that makes sense.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we've hit 20 minutes.
Yes.
So let's wrap it up, and hopefully people have got something out of this. Obviously, if you are listening and you've got questions, then please fire them at Linda, not at me.
Thank you.
If there's a direction of travel with these discussions, it would be helpful to let us know, because we could do more of these. If you hate them, then click don't click a thumbs down. But just give us some feedback, because it would be helpful for us to know. Linda, thanks ever so much. We will pick up potentially another conversation very shortly.
Thank you, Dan.